Session 8, titled Not Either Or, Addressing Body-Self Dualism. And this has the potential to sound very philosophical. This is why I'm doing it at 2 and not at 4:30 whenever you're going to be tired. But it's important to understand the constructs out of which people work and we think. So, I want to talk about body-self dualism. The aim of this session is to address how body-self dualism springs from a faulty understanding of what it means to be an embodied person and results in an approach to sexuality that attempts to divorce our physical bodies from our mental constructs. In our present culture, it is popular to posit a division between one's conception of personhood and one's understanding of the body. One of the most clear, or one of the clearest examples of this division, where I am not my body or I am not what I perceive about myself, can be found in the debate over abortion. So, for instance, would you think about the debate over abortion in terms kind of the two cases, or the two sides? Pro-life advocates understand the personhood of a fetus and the physical body of a fetus as inseparably united. Okay, do you understand what I'm saying? A pro-life advocate says you cannot look at the fetus and then say that's just physical matter and not also attribute to it its personhood and say that is a person created in the image of God. And so, pro-life advocacy sees a union between body and self. Pro-choice advocacy, on the contrary, argues that while the physical body of a fetus may doubtlessly be human, which geneticists undeniably affirm that the fetus is human. There's no debate, and it's also alive. So what do you have? If you have a human and it's alive, it's a live human, right? Okay? Now, but what happens within the argument is that while they doubtlessly affirm that it's human, the personhood of the fetus is a matter of debate, particularly related to the stages of development, dependence upon others, and desirableness in the world. So what does the pro-choice advocacy do? It separates body from personhood. It says, doesn't matter that it's human, it's not a person. Pro-life advocacy says, you don't get to do that. You don't get to separate personhood from the humanity of a fetus. So what I'm doing is I'm using this as an example of where you've seen this type of argument take place before. When someone says what is physically present in there is not a person, because personhood, they say, requires these things. And sometimes those things have to do with their development stage, dependence upon others, and desirableness within the world. Now, this is not a session on the sanctity of life, although it would be a good topic for us to explore in the future. But what I'm doing is I want us to see that if a culture is willing to dehumanize the fetus by declaring that just because a fetus is human, that doesn't mean it's a person, on the basis of its ideas of personhood, then it will be the mental constructs of self that become determinative for our understanding of worth and purpose related to the human body. Thus, we can see in that example how a particular view or a faulty view of body self leads to a detrimental effect. When we separate body from self, what we end up having is this disunity that takes place where one becomes subservient to the other and one is denied in favor of the other. Now, some of you may be thinking, but hold on. This idea of dualism, that's not all bad, right? Because doesn't Christianity have a degree of dualism? I mean, don't we talk about a body and a soul? Yeah, we do. We do. There is a form, a tradition within Christianity, according to a philosopher by the name of Nancy Percy, who I'm going to reference quite a bit tonight, where Christianity is dualistic because it holds that there exist both the body and soul, matter and spirit. These two substances causally interact with one another, but neither can be reduced to the other. The reality of the spiritual realm is important to defend today because the academic world is dominated by a philosophy of materialism. They claim that nothing exists beyond the material world, yet Christianity holds that the body and soul together form an integrated unity and that the human being is an embodied soul. Nevertheless, here's what we find within our culture. It's not a Christian understanding of body and soul. So when I speak tonight and in several other sessions about this body-soul dualism, I'm not speaking of body-soul dualism or body-self dualism within the Christian tradition. Instead, I'm speaking about a type of dualism that intentionally posits a division between body and self, where Christians posit a unity between body and self. Now, we're going to see how that's exceedingly clear in a few moments. But you may be asked, why is it important for Christians to affirm a unity of body and self? To answer this question, we must revisit the categories that we looked at last week regarding biblical sexuality and the body. So in that session, if you recall, we spoke of how embodied persons are created in the image of God. In that session, we looked at Genesis 1 and 2 in considerable length, and we talked about how to be created in the image of God is to reflect aspects of God's character, specifically in a few ways: dominion on earth, fruitfulness, which included reproducibility, and then the physicality of God's presence, which is inextricably related to human beings being formed and filled by God in creation, and also points to the incarnation. Now, when we look at the implication of this threefold look of the image of God, dominion, fruitfulness, physicality, one of the implications is that our bodies were created with a particular purpose or end in mind. So, I need a little bit of participation here. What is an eye created to do? See. Okay, good. What is an ear created to do? Hear. Now, let me ask you, if an eye could not see or an ear could not hear, would you expect a physician to walk in and say, you know, that's a really good eye and a really good ear that you have? Would you expect that? Why not? Because they don't function. But what do we mean they don't function? They're still present. They're not functioning how? According to their design. They're not doing their job. So what does that mean? Our bodies have embedded within them a purpose, a means, an end that we don't get to determine. I mean, we just simply don't get to determine. We don't get to wake up and go, you know what? I feel like I would like to hear with my eyes today. You can do that all you want. But that's foolishness, right? I'm going to go see with my ears. Now, granting I understand that those that are deaf, or no, sorry, not those that are deaf, but those that are blind have an increased sense of hearing. You can't hear the color blue. God has designed the body in particular ways with a particular end in mind. When something is not fulfilling the purpose for which it is created, it is acting contrary to nature. We could do this with almost every system in the body. We would come to the same conclusion. Certain purposes are inscribed within our body. That would be worth writing down. Certain purposes are inscribed in our body. And this is no less true for our reproductive systems related to our sexuality. Even biological scientists who do not believe in God or creation must admit that our cosmos possesses an inescapable order. So, I told you, I asked the question, why is it important for Christians to affirm a unity of body and self? Why? Because the body reflects an undeniable order, right? Now, within myself, within my person, I could show up and I could say, well, this is how I feel. This is how I want to be. But I am not allowed to transgress my createdness, my embodiedness with my feelings in such a way that tells everyone else in the world that yes, while an eye is created for that and an ear is created for that, I intend to use them in this way. You just simply can't do that. That's an untenable world to live in. Yet in many ways, that is what's happening with the present debate regarding sexuality within our culture, which says, I'll do what I want with what I have because it's mine and myself. Self-determinative ends. It's not sustainable, though. You know that that's not the case. Just proved it. It snuck up on you. You agreed with me that a good eye sees and a good ear hears. And the reason you did that is because it's not controversial within culture right now. If it were, you might want to line up with culture more, but the reality is you just affirmed that there's certain things that were created for a certain purpose, and that's part of our nature that's not up for a debate. And so we recognize is that there is a need for ourselves to be subjected in many ways to what our bodies have shown and determined. If it is the case that our bodies reflect a particular purpose or end that is biologically irrefutable, then how is it that people can arrive at a different conclusion about how our bodies ought to be used? The answer to that question is found in an understanding of the body-self dualism that separates physical material reality from mental constructs about personhood. In other words, if one can separate who they are from what they are, that is their embodied state, or they could argue that what they are is determined not by their bodies but by their mental constructs, then they can justify their preferred behaviors in the body because the body's unmistakable purpose is not a factor into their action. When people allow one aspect of their being, divorced from its unity, whether physical or mental, to become the essence of their personhood instead of the affirmation of unity of the physical and mental in one person, people will be able to justify nearly any behavior, and the results will be devastating on a personal and a societal level. Furthermore, people tend to only make an argument for this separation of body and self when it's convenient. I think this is interesting, and you'll affirm this as well. As one writer notes, think of your own experience as a human being. Your body is not just a shell in which you dwell. Your body is not just a body. Your body is somebody. It's you. Through the profound unity of your body and soul, your body reveals or makes known the invisible reality of your spiritual soul. The you are is not just a soul in a body. Your body is not something you have or own alongside yourself. Your body is you. You say, I don't believe that. Yes, you do. Want to know why you believe that? Because if someone broke your jaw, you would not take them to court for property damage, but personal assault. Why? Because they assaulted you not your property. Why? Because you know deep down there's a union between your body and yourself. But the only reason why you actually posit that there's a division is because it's an inconvenient truth to a way that you want to live. And this is not just about other people's sins. This is about how we tend to think about ourselves and our justifications. This is from Christopher West, who was the author of those points before. He goes, we do with our body, what we do with our bodies and what is done to our bodies, we do or have done to ourselves. Now, at this point, someone might be inclined to say, yes, but my body is really complex and it's capable of doing a lot of different things. So, hey, teacher, that's a really reductionistic way to speak of these things. In fact, some of the things that my body can do that maybe it's not quote unquote designed for, they're particularly pleasurable. If I can do it, why shouldn't I do it? Shouldn't the purpose of my body be determined by me? My body, my choice, right? Let me answer the question by illustrating the danger of prioritizing personal preference over intended purpose. I hope this doesn't happen to anybody tonight. It's always the danger of giving an illustration that's related to medical things, is you're worried that you're going to get a call in the middle of the night. Oh my goodness, somebody did get rushed to the hospital with a ruptured appendix. So I hope that doesn't happen. But just for the thought of it, and maybe you have been rushed to the hospital before with a ruptured appendix. But say you're rushed this evening to the ER and emergency surgery is required to address the issue. So as you wait in the OR before anesthesia, a lady walks in to talk to you before they proceed. She tells you that she's the surgeon on call this evening and that she will be performing the surgery. And it's interesting. In the OR, the anesthesiologist hasn't been able to make it in yet. And so you're still awake. You're in some sort of pain. And the surgeon's trying to describe to you, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to do these things. And they start to point and say, I'm going to use this tool, and I'm going to use this tool, and then we're going to remove this. And they're trying to calm you down. And you're thinking, okay, I really appreciate this doctor caring. Everything seems fine. And then the doctor picks up a ball-peen hammer. And you're like, I didn't think that this was an orthopedic surgery. And the doctor says, oh, you're wondering about the ball-peen hammer. I use the ball-peen hammer to access the abdominal cavity and remove the appendix. You're a bit concerned, understandably. Doctor, pardon me for asking, but why don't you use a scalpel instead? Doctor responds, well, while one is dull and the other is razor sharp, they're both made of high carbon steel and they both are hand tools. I can gain access to the abdominal cavity and remove the appendix with both of the tools. I guess the reason why I enjoy using the ball-peen hammer is I can do it and it's kind of a preference of mine. How many of you would ask for a second opinion? Exactly. None of you want that surgeon. Why? Because while she might technically be right about her ability to open you up and to remove the appendix with a ball-peen hammer, you know that it is not what it's designed to accomplish. Just because it's possible to do something, that does not mean one should do it or desire to do it. We do not want to live in or promote a world that disregards the purpose for which things were made. I am sure that someone could possibly break glass in their kitchen and then pick it up with their eyelids. But that would not be advisable, would it? In fact, it would be very detrimental. To deny and ignore purpose can lead to devastating results. So to frame our discussion tonight, I would ask, why would we allow this to be the case with sexuality and to think that things would be different? Why would we allow the idea that my body can be separated from my concept of self and that I can do what I want with my body without it actually impacting who I am, or who I am does not actually have or is being influenced in any way by how I've been embodied? So we have to ask that question. How are we perpetuating views of sexuality that essentially rest upon a foundation that teaches that in order for us to do these things, I have to separate my body from who I am? My body is not who I am. It's just a tool, and I can use it and do what I want with it. And so with the most part of what we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to talk about how sexual dysfunction or sexual disruptions are rooted in a denial of God's embedded purpose within our bodies, and that his word not only affirms it, but we have seen within a lot of secular studies that this is in fact true itself.